Well, the warmest of greetings to you, one and all. Welcome to the Christian Whistleblower channel. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and we are bringing you podcast excellence from an undisclosed location deep in the heartland of America, hopefully right to your heart. As always, on Monday night, I have my partner in crime, Robert Bauer, the professor.
Good evening, everyone.
And tonight, we're very, very happy, and I think for only the second time, welcoming someone back to The Last Stand. We have with us tonight Tom Montalk, and I asked someone right before we went on the air, I said, how would you describe Tom Montalk? And I was looking for a more descriptive answer, but they simply said, brilliant. And I have to agree with that. Tom is a fellow truth seeker who's on a quest to expose the dark and empower the light. His primary goal is to help others arm themselves with knowledge to better fulfill their evolutionary potential. Studied physics and electrical engineering for 4 years, then left college to pursue more independent research. His interests include spirituality, quantum, scalar physics, alienology, which we'll talk about tonight, alchemy, Gnosticism, and Hermeticism, forbidden history, and composing music. And listen to this, folks, symphonic and epic doom metal. Tom currently resides in Florida. Tom, I have to ask you, first of all, what is epic doom metal?
So it's a form of metal that's very deep and profound. It's kind of sad, but it's very apocalyptic and sad at the same time. Very sorrowful and emotional. And that's sort of how I feel about the times that we live in. You know, for me, it's music for the times, personally.
And what is is there a goal of epic doom metal, and what would it be if there is one?
The ones that I compose. So on my channel, I've got this project called Crypto. So if you go to my YouTube channel,
Montalk.net, Montalk.net.
Yeah, that's my website. And then it's youtube.com/Tom Montalk. If you go there, it's a song called Cryptos. And for me, that's my interpretation of epic doom metal. And it's something that's almost larger than life, like almost larger than modern life. It's eschatology. How do you say that? Eschatology in Christianity.
Yes. Logical.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But for me, that is the fundamental vibe behind it. So it's what I resonate with. You know, I feel like we're up against a lot in this world, a lot to hope for, but also a lot to overcome. And that's sort of a epic theme I like to incorporate into my music sometimes.
Well, Tom,
absolutely. Not to be sorry, Professor, not to be stereotypical, but would old guys like me and the professor like to listen to epic doom metal typically?
Well, check out my song. I think my song's pretty good. There's some other bands out there that are kind of they emulate it, but I don't think they capture the vibe. So it's kind of waily, and I don't know. I wouldn't recommend that stuff, but at least check out mine, see if you like it. And if you don't like that one, you're not going to like any of the other epic doom metal stuff.
We definitely will. Professor Bauer.
Yes, Tom, as a fellow musician, tell me a little bit more about this music. What instruments do you play? Are you doing on guitar? Are you dropping this down into the D and lower ranges? Are you on a 7-string, really pounding it out? What's going on there?
Okay, yeah. So I sing, I play the guitar, I play bass, play the acoustic guitar, and lately I've been picking up the violin too. So I'm trying to add that in there. I still haven't gotten to piano yet, but yeah. So I do that, and I've been into music ever since I was a toddler. I came up with my first song when I was like 3 years old. It was only a verse and a chorus. Very, very dumb, but yeah. I mean, I love music so much.
Yeah, I've always said that if I wasn't a human being, I'd be a musical note looking for a tune to play on. I've produced. Well, I started playing when I was 13. Actually, my grandfather is the one who taught me guitar. And the first song I learned was Elvis Presley's "Love Me Tender, Love Me Sweet." Nice. And he played in a Chet Atkins kind of style where, you know, you played everything, bass, rhythm, and the melody all at the same time. And I sat there in just awe, and I said, how in the hell? And he couldn't read a note of music, but he played every week at a little place in Southern California called Me and Ed's Pizza Parlor. And there was a guy with a upright piano that they'd taken the front cover off, and they painted each one of the hammers with fluorescent paint. So there was a blue light over there, and Grandpa'd get up there on his 1950s. It was a no-caster. It was before the Telecaster. It was actually serial number 007. So as a guitar player, I'm sure you appreciate some of the antiques of playing and music. But ever since, I mean, I went through everything from, I grew up in 60s and 70s in Southern California, so I was right in the mix of the magic that was music back then. And I think there was a significant energy and a wave that came through the cosmos and engulfed the planet that had a major influence on the minds and the music and the sound that came through at that time. So I can certainly relate to the grunge. I have done, I'm more of I got into rock and roll with Led Zeppelin and playing all the early classic stuff. And then I discovered jazz with John McLaughlin, Jean-Luc Ponty, Billy Cobham, and all those guys. And I just got into give me as much as you can within the music and make it profound. Give me the, the blazing 30-second notes, and then just hang on one for a couple of bars and make me feel it.
Hmm.
And
Well, there's a lot of connections between music and spirituality. Even a guy that can't play the radio like me is able to recognize that. And Tom, just we're going to talk about aliens tonight with I think it was the Voyager probe that they sent out that had, I believe, the Vivaldi music on it. What is your impression and your opinion of an idea of doing something like that and trying to communicate with species outside of our own?
So, of course, that probe, one day it's going to reach some star. Someone's going to find it. It's going to be millions, if not billions of years from now. But the premise that it was sent out on, of course, was that there is no life on Earth yet, other than humans and the native species. So it was kind of sent out on naive premises, I guess. The idea that aliens are not here already. So it's kind of like if the Europeans had come over to the New World and there's Native Americans around and they're sending out smoke signals to try to contact some other mythical Native American tribe or some other people, and yet there's already Europeans all around there, colonizing the place. It's kind of like that, So I mean, I think the spirit behind Voyager was awesome. I mean, that is what I think humanity should ideally aspire to. That there's this bigger picture, like aspiring to higher ideals. But in some ways, it was also a token gesture considering the long history that the alien presence has had here on Earth.
So it sounds like you believe that there is already, and if I read your site correctly, that the aliens are not recent visitors to Earth, but they've been here for hundreds of thousands of years and they continue to live here. You say mainly in underground bases. Is that still your conviction?
Yeah. So the thing about aliens is that the question of whether they exist or not, I think that question is over by this point, considering just how many researchers, how many books, websites, experiences. I mean, there's like polls where pretty much like 3% up to maybe 4% of Americans claim to be alien abductees or believe that they have been abducted. And that's millions of people. All right.
Right.
And then I think what is some like 50, maybe 60% of people actually believe that aliens exist somewhere out there. And maybe some other percentage believes that they're actually here already. So there's just too much out there to keep getting preoccupied with this question of whether aliens are here or not. So the next question is, who are they and why are they here?
Well, what are your thoughts on the ancient texts about how aliens have been here throughout all of the civilizations that we currently know about? Mm-hmm. When you look at the Sumerian texts and you start talking about the Anunnaki and, hundreds of thousands of years and their involvement in our creation. What's your thoughts there?
I think that even our genetics bear traces of genetic engineering. The researcher Lloyd Pye, who's deceased by now, but Lloyd Pye, he's done some extensive work on anomalies within human genetics. Things that indicate not only that we've been through a genetic bottleneck, but there's things like merging of chromosomes that distinguish humans from, let's say, chimpanzees, for example. Things that wouldn't really happen in a natural selection, random mutation context. So it seems that even if you go back, 300,000, 500,000 years, the coming of Homo sapiens and some of our, ancestors, possibly Neanderthals, they seem to have been genetically engineered by some other intelligent species, right? So then you go forward in time and you look at things like those huge megaliths in Peru and other places in South America, Turkey, Cyprus, Malta, those places. A lot of that stuff could only be done with super advanced technology, to levitate stones, to laser drill them, cut out channels using plasma beams, things like that. And we don't see enough archaeological evidence within human records themselves of the progression of technology, you know, going from like, you know, bow and arrow to fire to what all of a sudden now we have plasma weapons and things that can levitate stones. I don't think so. It's too much of a technological jump. So that tells me that there had to be some sort of an influx of extraterrestrial or some sort of other technology that was introduced here. And, you know, so many people are familiar with the Ancient Aliens show. And as much as I give that show crap sometimes, it is pretty good in actually documenting the evidence that's out there. So you can watch that show and you can make your own conclusions about what those evidence items mean, right? So between our genetic components, indicating anomalies there, megalithic stuff, you know, the Great Pyramid, for example, and then what you were talking about, Robert, you know, a lot of these myths and ancient records that go back to, you know, how did humanity come about? And, you know, a lot of us are familiar with Zecharia Sitchin's work, and there's some question about his interpretations of those records, but there's no doubt that Sumerians were not the only people talking about these sky beings, right? You got the Dogon tribes, you've got, I mean, even in Irish myths, you know, we're talking about the city, you know, these supernatural beings. I mean, it doesn't matter what culture you look at, each one has some reference to sky gods or sky beings of some kind, you know, especially like the Native Americans, they have so many references to it. So I think if you take that all together, we definitely have had some sort of a very long-standing alien presence on this planet, no doubt.
Do you think that they were actually part of not only creating us, but also continually working with and trying to evolve us in some way?
And are they still doing it now?
Yeah. I think it depends on the alien faction, because one thing we do know from abduction reports is that there are different types of aliens, and I'll get into that in a moment.
Please.
But
you have the floor. Go wherever you want to go.
Okay. So regarding the alien, what they were doing in the past, the question is, you know, why are they here? Who's who? And what do we do about it? Well, as I mentioned, these beings have been here since the dawn of the human race. And if they weren't, then I don't think we would be where we are in terms of not only how we look physically, but also where we are today technologically. The way human history has gone in very unusual, sudden twists by external influences that change the timeline in very surprising ways. So not only have they played a role in modifying our genetics, and not only have there been different factions, some benevolent or some malevolent, and some are mixed and some are neutral, but if you look at Sumeria, for example, they actually built dedicated cities to these different humanoid gods. And according to their own records, these cities were actually occupied by these beings. So imagine, you know, if you had a troop of, let's say, 12 humanoid alien beings, and they come to this primitive society, they give them knowledge, they give them some basic primitive technologies, they have them build cities, and they also build them not only food production capabilities, or, you know, in the case of Zecharia Sitchin's work, the idea that humans were originally created to be slaves to mine gold underground. But they were definitely using humans as almost like how we would use cattle nowadays, like slave labor. People that would worship you, people that would build you temples, offer you food, and you know, they're kind of living the high life, having deceived these primitive people into thinking that they are gods. And of course, they weren't gods; they were just humanoids with advanced technology, advanced psychic powers, and advanced intelligence. So that's my definition of an alien. It's something that's not human, but that is humanoid and is more intelligent, has higher technology abilities, and also is more psychic than we are. And that's kind of universal across the board with any abduction account or any contact account, that these beings share these three traits. So, you know, when some people talk about alien life like microbes on Mars, to me, that's not the aliens that we're talking about on the show. We're talking about actual intelligent forces that are here shaping human history and manipulating humans for better or for worse, depending on which faction we're talking about.
Now, to throw a curveball at you, you're talking about beings that have superior technology, superior psychic abilities that do appear godlike. Do you think, would you theorize, you know, this is just your opinion, that all things that we call gods are alien in origin?
Well, I do believe in an actual infinite creator. I've had personal experiences with divine beings that would be on the category of what we would call angels. And I know others who have also had contact with angelic type beings. So I know that there are non-physical, non-technological, intelligent beings out there, you know, and the same goes for the dark side too. I mean, not only are there negative aliens, but there are also demonic forces. And the term demon, it's something that Christians use the most, But of course, if you look at other cultures, whether it's in India or China, they all have their own terms for demons. So of course,
Right.
it's not a term that's limited to Christianity. It's a universal thing, and that's because demons are the polar opposite of angels, in the sense that they are also non-physical. They're also, for the most part, non-technological. They don't have bodies. They don't have like physical bodies, but they do have what the occultists would call an etheric or an astral body. So it's like it's like our own soul energy. It's like that, just a dark vibrational version of that. And so that's why you can't really kill a demon. You can just weaken it to the point where it kind of crawls back into the hole it came from. Now, some people believe that aliens are demons, or that what some people call demons are actual aliens. But in my opinion, if you have experience with both angels, demons, aliens, if you have experience with all three of those, there are definite differences between them. Not just like subtle nuances, but actual functional differences in their origins and the way they behave, the symptoms of when they're around, just the way you feel around them. So in my mind, in my research, I believe that all three of those exist. So I don't think that one is the other necessarily.
Yeah, and after almost 39 years of work in this realm, starting out as a Pentecostal evangelist casting out demons to where I am now, I concur with you. I think that there are ETs, there are demons, there are angels. And you, I believe, made the statement on your website that you feel that most of these things we call aliens are, what was the word you used, hyperdimensional.
Mm-hmm. Right. So there's this thing called the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which is the idea that aliens are they're from outer space. They came here on ships. They're physical beings just like us. They're just more advanced, by hundreds, if not thousands of years. But what we actually know about alien behavior and their capabilities, they don't seem to be 100% in our physical reality.
Okay. Good point.
Some of them appear to be what we would call either ultra-terrestrial meaning beyond physicality, beyond the Earth itself, like this dimension, or interdimensional. It's kind of the two different words for the same concept. And the best way that I could put it is that aliens are quasi-physical. And what that means is it's almost like what we know. We only know 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. Okay, but imagine that's like a flat sheet of paper. So imagine that they exist 1 dimension upwards, like 1 sheet of paper above the sheet of paper that's below. Okay, so it's separated by another additional dimension, and this is where they are. It's almost like another analogy would be radio stations. They're on a different frequency from where we are. But if you were to shift into their frequency, whether through your own psychic powers or through technology, they would appear 100% physical to you. So we're just on different channels, and they can project themselves here into our time, into our dimension, whenever they want. And some of them are better at it than others. So there's certain aliens who, let's say the reptilians, for example, they're not very good at maintaining their form here in our dimension. And I'm saying this based on the thousands of people that I've corresponded with over the past 2 decades. They provided me with tons of data points. So a lot of this evidence that I have is it's personal, it's anecdotal, So of course it's not going to convince the skeptics, but I'm just putting it out there for anyone who might have had similar experiences, right?
Absolutely.
So anyway, so what the pattern is that certain aliens require either a lot of mental psychic energy in order to project themselves here and to stay here for an extended period of time, and others are very adept at being here, and they also happen to look a lot like us. So there are also human-looking aliens, whether they are time travelers, whether they are offshoots of the human race that kind of went on their own way and became very advanced. Who knows? But they are among us in our society. They can show up at UFO conferences. They can walk up to you in the street, and you might sense something kind of strange about them. But if they're very good, they're good at disguising who they are. But they are around us. And
then think any of them are speaking at UFO conferences?
I don't think speaking. I think they keep a low profile.
Okay.
I think they keep a low profile.
To your point about low profile,
mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've noticed in my research is when you look at the evidentiary data, what I call informatica, of what's out there, there's one consistent piece that they all seem to have, and it's basically they're very stealthy. Even throughout the entire written, and I like to say that if you look at myth as history and history as myth, you start really unraveling some of the truth that's actually happened. I tend to think that Cremo's work and looking at some of the ancient, forbidden, hidden archaeology, as well as even Hancock's, is very profound. And Michael Tellinger, which I'd like to get into in when we start talking about more of the energy within the cosmos. As I look at the entire cosmos as consciousness and energy, and everything else falls out from that. But to your point about this multi-dimensional aspect, which could explain some of this incredibly stealthy activity that these folks have been using for millennia, as far as we know, and even more importantly today, with all of the ubiquitous access of technology, being able to record just about anything that happens, there's more amazing footage and audio that we're all seeing, but tangible physical evidence is still very elusive. So, to the point about multidimensional, what do you think about the concept of the multiverse versus and or being inclusive into multidimensional?
Yeah, the multiverse, what we're talking about there is we're talking about other realities that are parallel to ours, right? I mean, that's basically what we mean by the multiverse. And we know from everything from past life research to out of body experiences to things like ghosts that there are other realms than ours, that these beings, like for example, ghosts or demons, that they can retreat back into when we can't see them, right? So we know there are other planes of existence that contain life forms. Some would be more tangible, like
And
the physical plane.
how do we know that? You
We
said
know
we
that,
know that. How do we know it?
yeah. Well, like for example, with abduction experiences, a lot of times abductees are actually taken up into a higher dimension, um, where the abduction environment takes place within, or like UFO sightings. We can tell that UFOs, and I'm talking about alien ships, how they pop into existence and then they can just pop out of existence and appear somewhere else. How did they get between point A and B if they didn't go through the third dimension as we know it between those 2 points? Okay.
How is that different though than quantum mechanics? I mean, you can
Exactly.
materialize and dematerialize from a scientific or at least a mathematical perspective, and it doesn't require interdimensional or multiverse connection.
But see, that's the thing though. So in college, I studied physics and electrical engineering, and quantum physics was one of the courses that I've taken. And since I got out of college, taking that course allowed me to read a bunch of other texts and papers on quantum physics. And the thing is, there is no contradiction or divide between what quantum physics experiments with and hints about, and what you're talking about with the multiverse and multidimensionality. They're all part of the same continuum. And if you were to understand these things about the multi-dimensions and so on, you would understand it probably from a quantum physics viewpoint, because it is quantum physics. Okay. Now, quantum physics is just a functional behavioral description of how things work at a subatomic level. Okay.
Which is all theoretical.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. So it's theoretical. It's an interpretation of how things work at that scale. And there's like dozens of different interpretations of quantum mechanics. And each one of them has its adherents in the form of PhDs and entire societies that are dedicated to that one viewpoint. And the thing is, you can't really say that quantum physics as a whole, contradicts or denies, a lot of this paranormal or hyperdimensional stuff, because even among quantum physicists, there is no agreement or consensus about what's really going on.
Isn't that the beauty of anything being theoretical, is it's just all speculation and a guess based on mathematical models, which all those models, when you get down to math, it's nothing but symbology, right?
Yeah.
So if you are looking at the cosmos and you're looking at the universe, and gets into one of the questions I wanted to get into with you. If you look at the scientific paradigm and the way in which, for example, the Big Bang, right, is the considered, at least, and it's all theoretical, but it is the basis of which everything is, right? There was this infinitesimally small and infinitesimally dense a moment and space in time that went from the infinite to the finite. It unfolded. And I have this discussion with people who are in the atheist realm that get their knickers in a twist about, some higher intelligence and cosmological consciousness that was the result of everything. And they adhere to the scientific method, and they'll say, well, look at the Big Bang, right? Big Bang is what happened. But when you look at it and you ask the real question of, well, if something decided to go from infinite to finite and it unfolded into the materium that we see with our three-dimensional 5 sense capacity to experience that of the reality that's around us, there must have been some instruction set, because the elements, the way in which the universe and the cosmos that we observe unfolded, obviously had some instructions. So there had to be information available before this Big Bang, which then goes to the question of intelligence. Now we'll skip past that and let's just go right into the cosmos. It appears that there is this vast amount of information in this form of materium. You can start at the planet, go to the solar system, go to the galaxy, and then go to Lanai, and all this amazing stuff that's been found by instruments that were designed to find that stuff. And that's one of the fallacies I find with the scientific process and just what we have from an academic perspective. There's a definition of everything that's been designed to find those definitions. Yet we as consciousness energy beings experience so much more that is not defined or explained, and in most cases completely ignored by the scientific community. And where you find these definitions is in these belief systems and philosophies. Again, you go back to the Vedic texts, the Mahabharata, you look at all of the really ancient stuff, and there's a definition of the consciousness and the existence that we inhabit and experience. So if there is multiple dimensions, if there is a multiverse that we seem to at least theoretically define and experientially experience within ourselves, there appears to be a whole group of other intelligent conscious beings, going back to the alien theme, that are all around us and inhabiting the planet. And it seems like there's this clear division between the light side and the dark side. That seems to be, I'm a Taoist, so I adhere to, just being within the universe concept from the I Ching and the Taoist methodology and thought process. But there seems to be a whole bunch of these different entities that have a commonality of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think the cosmos, the intelligence that took this infinite thing to a finite, included this good and bad? Why wasn't it all just good?
I think because free will is one of the fundamental conditions, one of the fundamental features of this reality that we're in. Okay, so if you are intelligent, if you have sentience, if you have consciousness, you have some level at least of free will. And what free will means is that you can choose things without it being chosen for you. And therefore, if the infinite creator projected individual God sparks of intelligence into this, virtual simulation, I guess you could say, that we're in, if these individual projections have free will, then they also have the ability to go against the creator and go against each other. It's just part of the condition of having choice. Because if we were all created 100% good, then we necessarily wouldn't have free will to be good. So therefore it would basically be the infinite creator playing with itself with like little toys, like just moving little toy soldiers around, instead of giving them free will and therefore allowing them to create actual novelty of experience.
Do you have a sense of how much of what we have been given to experience is free, as in free will, and how much is controlled or in the destiny definition?
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of like a choose your own adventure book, in that you have this author who writes the book, he writes all the text, and all you get to do is flip the pages here and there. So it's piecewise in the sense of it's piecewise free will. I mean, in physics, they call it piecewise determinism. And that's where you have a chain of cause and effect that's sort of mapped out, it's set in stone, but you're the one who gets to choose which of those chains of cause and effect you initiate. Is it this one or that one or that one? So it is like a choose your own adventure book. That's how I view this reality. So we have some free will, enough to make things interesting, but not enough that, I can just choose to fly on out of here right now. Obviously, we're bound by the laws of physics until you develop enough abilities where you can kind of bypass that.
So how does reincarnation, or what I call incarnation, play into that?
Well, incarnation. So when you're not here, when you're not incarnated, you're, based on all the past life research that's out there, you're in a realm, you're in a state of existence where you have way more freedom than you do here. But what you're missing, though, is you're missing the challenge, the hardship, the opposition, the obstacles, and also the amnesia about who you are. These are all things that are missing when you're in this freer, more empowered state. So then the question is, why would you leave that behind and come here? And then I ask people, well, what's the point of climbing a mountain when you just, go to a beach somewhere and relax? Why do some people go through that challenge? And it's because they want to prove something to themselves. They want to discover something about themselves. They want to grow as people. So as humans, we already see it within ourselves that we have a penchant for drama and challenge and excitement. There's no triumph or glory without a battle, right? So some people are into that. Some souls are really into that. And I think that our world, I can't say this is the case for all souls, but for a lot of souls, I think they come here for the challenge of it and to experience what it's like to be limited in order to overcome that limitation and therefore, I guess, rediscover themselves and develop strengths that they couldn't have developed otherwise, hanging out back in the afterlife.
Do you think they are off-world brothers and sisters, cousins, and extended family also go through a reincarnation or incarnation iterative processes?
Yeah, definitely. Because from what I found, as long as you have a physical body of some kind, whether it's, sort of shifted out from this reality or in this reality or, somewhat quasi-etheric, it's a vehicle. And these same beings, they also have technology. They have bases. They wear, clothes, uniforms, things like that. So obviously they have some sort of a vehicle that requires shelter and transportation, right? And that can be lost. That can be lost. But consciousness, of course, is eternal. So if the body can be lost, but consciousness goes on, then you could say that they would have to incarnate into that vehicle to begin with in order to even be alien, to even be humanoid as we experience them.
Interesting. Now, we've talked about aliens, we've talked about hyperdimensionals, interdimensionals, and we've talked about the ultimate intelligence or ultimate deity. Tom, in your opinion, do you think that all of these beings that we're talking about fall under an infinite creator, infinite source, infinite divinity?
Yeah, it's a good question. What we do know is even if you exclude the alien thing for now, okay, just from experiences, my own personal experiences with ghosts and demons, I know that there are demons of different levels of power and sophistication. There's like little minion ankle biters, and then there's some pretty sophisticated psychopathic monsters, and the whole spectrum in between. So I would imagine that spectrum continues upwards to the ultimate demonic intelligence that's out there, which would be at the very bottom of creation. Okay. And then conversely, we also know that there are humans who are very good. They're almost like angels in human bodies. They're just very heartful and nice and kind, compassionate. And I've also had visitations occasionally, including in dreams, by beings who seem to be very positive, very caring, and they try to impart some snippet of knowledge about this reality and who we are and why we're here. Okay. And I know others who've had a lot of experiences with angelic beings, like true angelic beings. So I would imagine also that spectrum continues upwards until you have the ultimate infinite good intelligence. And that's what I would define as the infinite creator. Okay. So you've got almost like infinite goodness at the top and infinite, darkness at the bottom. And humans are somewhere in the middle. And you've got the spectrum going up and you got a spectrum going down. Now, aliens would be above the human level slightly and also below the human level slightly. So
that's powerful. That's great thought. I never thought of it that way. So when you start talking about the middle way, now you've got a whole new paradigm to think about the middle way. So ultimate balance going up, ultimate imbalance going down, and all of these intermeaning levels in between. That's a powerful concept. That's really a life-changing, mind-bending paradigm that I've never considered. Now, you said that there's also aliens that are underground. Does that mean that some of them are more physical than we are, and they're living in a more of a physical environment? Have they been here that long that they've adapted to some sort of a meat suit like we have?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, there are those that are more physical. Okay.
That's my favorite answer, by the way. Yes, yes, and no.
Yes and no.
Both and.
Okay, so another consistent pattern that I've come across in a lot of abductee and contactee accounts is that one of the abilities that aliens have, whether it's through consciousness or through technology, is what's called phasing. So they're able to change their phase. Now, I would call it quantum phase. Now, I'm not going to get into what quantum phase is, but anyone familiar with quantum physics knows about quantum phase. And earlier, Robert, you're talking about how does quantum physics tie into multidimensionality? Well, quantum physics has this thing called quantum phase, and it is like it's basically like a fourth dimensional direction between timelines. So if you got a timeline here, a timeline here, a timeline here, the dimension between them is the fourth dimension, or it could be called quantum phase. All right. So aliens are able to manipulate this quantum phase, and that's how they're able to shift between whatever their reality they're in and our reality. So they're able to shift crosswise, and we can't do that really. But
do you think we used to know how and have forgotten, or we just don't know yet?
Yeah, I think we used to know it more for sure. You know,
I think that was back in the Atlantean type culture, which, you know, Casey was very, very specific about in his reads and what he saw. And actually, one of his readings, he said that, you know, there was the iterative incarnation process. There's a whole bunch of people who were Atlanteans who are here now to try to help not only move this cosmological cycle that we're in move forward, but also to make up for some of the mistakes that they did in killing off their own civilization. But do you think that that is a part of what's going on right now as well?
Well, I mean, I think just regarding Atlantis in general, I think it was an Earth-based alien outpost where they recruited a lot of humans to run it. So that's where the Atlanteans got their technology. Because, like I said, there's not really an archaeological record of a steady progression of technology leading from Stone Age up to Atlantean. You know, where we've got this steady, like, nice curve of, you know, different artifacts. It's more like, boom, there's the Atlanteans with their advanced technology. So that's why I think they were given it or leased it by alien beings. Okay. And part of that technology does include what I mentioned just now, which is called phasing technology. And so that goes back to your question, Jeff, about underground bases. So one of the patterns that comes out in abduction reports is that sometimes abductees are taken into a ship and they can actually see the ship go into a mountain, into a solid mountain, into a base that's inside of it, but without necessarily there being any sort of a tunnel or cutout or, you know, like a pathway into it. And so what people were theorizing is that these bases are sometimes phased out of physicality slightly. And that allows these bases to exist inside solid mountains without the mountains themselves having to be carved out as you would, you know, with a military base, for example. Okay. So it's almost like if you right now could walk into a wall, like if you're a ghost and you could walk into a wall, into a solid wall and just stand there inside the wall. Imagine if you could do that with an entire group of beings and all their equipment into a solid mountain and be stationed there, you know, permanently, as long as you got the technology on.
And a mountain's just energetic, and the equipment and the people and the material is just energetic. So energetically and theoretically, it seems to be very possible.
Exactly. So imagine this is our reality, and this is their like ship or whatever, and all they have to do is slide it over into another dimension, and now it can be superimposed. Okay, so they're going into this additional dimension and just like overlapping it. That's what they're doing. And so it's possible for aliens to exist in underground bases that don't have to be necessarily carved out.
Got it.
They can be down there, and that also allows them to exist down there without having to project themselves 100% into our 3D reality, which, as I mentioned earlier, requires a lot of energy sometimes, like psychic, technological energy, to be in this vibration, the station that we're in right now. So yeah. So some of them can be, and some of them probably use this phasing technology to be near here, but not quite here, and that allows.
So just a slight change in phase can allow them to be in that area. That makes perfect sense. Now, a lot of times I think as humans, and especially people that come into awareness and we start thinking about all these things, we become convinced that there are aliens, there are extraterrestrials, that they are amongst us. I think our preponderance, I don't know if that's the right word, our predisposition is to look at them as being omnipotent, to look at them as being all powerful, to look at them as being without limitations. Now, on your website, you talk about thinking and believing and I think having proof that they do have limitations. Can you discuss some of those limitations of these beings?
Yeah, for starters, as I said, not all of them can exist here permanently. They have to use an extreme amount of psychic energy to be able to project themselves here. And some of them might even be time travelers. Okay.
Ooh.
And the thing about time travel, there was an interesting paper out by, I think his name was Daniel Greenberger. He talked about the quantum physics of time travel. And he used the actual equations of quantum physics and simulated what a very basic time travel setup would be between interactions between the future and the past. And what he found is that it's not the case where you can only go back within your timeline. You know, like in these time travel movies where some guy tries to go back to change the past, but he ends up creating the very past he came from. I think it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see that all the time in the movies. And what he found out was that that's not necessarily the case. That's only the case if you visit a timeline in the past where there's 100% match between its quantum phase and your quantum phase.
Ah.
But he talked about a case where you can visit other pasts where, you know, maybe it's only a 90% match in phase. You know, the phase is slightly off. But here's the thing. The more off, the more different your quantum phase is from the past you're trying to visit, the more, you know, quote, fuzzy your interaction is with things in that past. And what that means by fuzzy is, like, right now, I'm 100% in this reality with, you know, this little, whatever this is, it's like pack index cards. So I can pick it up, I can move it whenever I want, right? But if this thing were, let's say, at 90% phase and I'm 100% phase, so we're like 10% phase apart, maybe I'd go to reach for it and my hand goes right through it. Maybe I try to like look for it and I reach for it, but it's not there because, I don't know, all of a sudden there's a reality glitch and it's just not on my desk anymore. So what fuzzy time travel means is you can try to change the past, but you run into issues with, you know, physicality, like maybe you're just not physical enough to affect anyone there, so you can only be an observer, which ties into the phenomenon of orbs. You know, people feel like orbs are, you know, these orbs that are captured in photos. Some people feel that they are observing intelligences, but then the question is, what's observing? What is it? Is it, you know, is it just spirit entities, or could it actually be time travelers, you know, aliens, things like that can't fully manifest here 100% physically, so they're just projecting their consciousness just enough to be able to view a past that they couldn't otherwise 100% physically interact with. Okay,
That's fascinating. So they're kind of like proverbial flies on the wall.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So fuzzy time travel means that aliens don't have the ability to 100% physically, 100% of the time, influence everything that goes on here. And that actually answers the earlier question when you asked about why, or where you talked about them being so stealthy. Part of the stealth isn't just a matter of, you know, operational security, but I think it might also be a limitation of the fact that they are not from here, not from this dimension, and they have to come here obeying these quantum physical rules about how things work.
So let me ask you this. It seems as though with these other entities have this amazing intelligence, psychic ability, phase shifting capability, technology that is so far beyond anything that we not only, and obviously we have a lot of stuff that, or the powers that be, if you will, have a lot of the stuff that, you know, you're talking about. At least in my research, there seems to be a fair amount of electrogravitic capabilities. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Violette's work, but just some amazing capabilities of suspending the materium, being able to move about freely without any of the current energetic and propulsion type technology that we currently have. But if you've got the psychic capability, you've got dimensional phasing, you've got this amazing technology, what do they find interesting in us? What is it? Why are they here even bothering with these carbon-based units that
Great question.
have so much intellectual, emotional, psychic conflict that is, you know, it's been around since at least the written history that we have. Why are they bothering with us, these meat suits?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great question. I mean, that is the crux of the issue. The question, why are they here? And the reason that's important is because it's going to play a role in our future, in our destiny as a species.
They're doing it because they're being benevolent and trying to help us out. Is that your point?
And or the opposite?
And or the opposite. It's yes and no. It's both, actually.
I love that answer.
Right? It's both.
They're harvesting us, preparing us for the great meal of the future of the galactic dining room.
Okay, so there are different alien factions, and they each have different agendas. Some appear to be benevolent, and they are smaller in number, at least in America. They're smaller in number as far as their presence goes. But the majority of alien abductions that you hear about, whether it's Greys or reptilians and just abductions in general, they're being carried out by negative alien factions, and also some of the human shadow military groups that they work with or that they've infiltrated.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. So nowadays, I know there's some researchers out there who want to say there are no bad abductions. It's all military groups, staging alien abductions, trying to portray them in a bad light because they're xenophobic and they want to turn us against aliens. That's not really true. What's actually going on, as far as I can tell, is that we have negative alien groups working with human shadow military groups. They're working together at the same time sometimes in these underground bases on joint projects to abduct people. And the question is, what is that stuff all for? Well, there's multiple components to it. One component is the hybrid breeding program, which you're all familiar with. So creating hybrids. And what's the purpose of hybrids? Well, the purpose of hybrids, as far as I can tell, is to create basically an elite liaison class who will intermediate between the alien, I guess, I don't want to call it empire, that sounds kind of hokey, but the alien forces and human civilizations when disclosure happens. Okay. So because as I mentioned, aliens tend to be phased out of this reality and into like another parallel plane of existence. So they can't be here 100% of the time, managing everything. That's why they use puppets. That's why they have to create hybrids that can sustainably be here and run affairs of this planet, and yet also be psychically interfacing with their alien handlers.
So this brings up a whole nother question, which I haven't seen anybody provide any kind of cogent answer to. All of this alien abduction and the hybrids and the probing and everything else that goes on is a recent phenomenon. If these aliens have been around for millennia, millions of years, have been influencing and creating the humanoid form that we currently see now, you don't see anything about these abductions and all of this throughout the current written history that we know of. Why all of a sudden are these guys popping in and probing?
No, that's a great question. So because they are somewhat outside linear time, time for them doesn't move as slowly as it does for us. So for them, it can be a 1, 2, 3 process of, first creating, our ancient hominids, then creating Homo sapiens, then when the time is right, creating the next step of evolution in their minds. But what they call evolution is actually a form of genetic handicapping, okay? Because of, any of you who have pets, cats, dogs, you know how psychic they can be sometimes. They can see things that we can't see. They can pick up on energies. They can pick up on a person who, smiles to your face, but he's got a knife behind his back. Well, animals can often pick up on that. And that's because these animals were not genetically altered by aliens to have their psychic component, programmed out of them as we humans have. So humans are actually psychically handicapped compared to where we should be. It's kind of weird, that compared to our ancient hominids, we are intellectually more sophisticated. We've evolved in that sense. We've evolved technologically. And yet psychically, we're probably even dumber than a forest deer, Psychically, we're not even as on that level. It's like we're regressed on that level, and yet we're intellectually boosted, okay? So that's a form of lopsided genetic engineering to create a type of race or species that's useful to the alien agenda that doesn't have the third eye ability to, for example, see a cloaked alien, to see, these things that exist outside of 3D materiality. So in a sense, we've been enhanced in certain ways that are useful to them, and we've been blinded in other ways. But here's the thing, though. They're not done with that modification yet. They haven't gone far enough. And that's another reason for the hybrid breeding program, which is to create the next level of human, quote, evolution, which is even more lopsided in the sense that, okay, they're going to have psychic abilities this time because now they're actually going to be in league with the alien control system. They're going to be more intellectually advanced, but they're going to be lacking emotion. They're going to be lacking spontaneity, intuition, true spiritual free will, I guess you could say. So they'll be less capable of independent thought and emotion and everything that makes us truly human in a good way, they're going to be lacking that. And so what you'll end up with is you'll end up with a new species of humanity that's more easily controllable by the aliens, that's more useful for them because they're going to be a little more intellectual, so they can be assigned to do more complicated tasks, for example. It's almost like I think they're terraforming our genetics to make us more useful to their agenda, and that could include colonizing other worlds and doing to those worlds what aliens have done to us.
Do you
It's almost
think
like
that's part of the transhumanist agenda that's going on? That
Oh, yeah.
Ray Kurzweil and these guys talk about.
yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, if you want to get kind of biblical on this, you want to go back to the Garden of Eden story and the idea of the fall of man, right? Being kicked out of the garden, being kicked into the wilderness, which is the reality that we're in right now. I think that if you were to take that myth seriously, that the fall was not completed, and that the alien agenda right now, including transhumanism, is to complete the fall. And what that means is to take our innate spiritual potential, our God spark, our consciousness, and fully lock it into a physical, genetically altered vehicle that makes it extremely difficult to escape from that or to think outside those programmed parameters. So, I mean, right now we know that humans are, we're very programmed. You just look around at your relatives, neighbors, friends, whatever. A lot of people are in this hypnotic state, easily programmed by the media, whatever. It's like we're meant to be programmed, and but not enough for these alien beings, because we are still difficult to control. I mean, I think to them, we're like trying to control us right now is like trying to herd cats, and that's why they're trying so hard with the elites to set up New World Order type mechanisms. But a lot of times it falls on its face just because people see through it, or maybe people are just still too emotional sometimes to go along with the program. So I think that's a problem, and they consider the human factor a problem. Okay, and to solve that problem, they have to change what it means to be human, and I think they're going to do that, or they're going to try to do that technologically, genetically, and cybernetically. That's what they're going for, and the transhumanism thing is just a warm up to that phase.
Interesting observation, and then a question. We've got about 9 minutes left till we get to our hour, but. Robert, you said that why is this new, the abduction thing, the interaction thing? And what popped in my head was, is it new? If we go back to some of the old tales, some of the old myths, some of the old legends, my background is Irish. We've got the Fae there, the leprechauns, the wee folks in the interactions there. We've got the vampire legends, which are many times kind of reptilian in nature. We've got the werewolf legends. So have we always been having these interactions with beings that we put them in a different context? And now that our technology and ideas have evolved, our idea of aliens have come up. And secondly, somebody asked in the chat room, and this sounds crazy, but is it possible that because of the way the United States is, and because of the the Judeo-Christian foundation and the locked and loaded population, and the fact that we seem to be more troublesome than a lot of the other places on the earth, is it possible that this hybridization program, these hybridization programs, are taking place in other areas other than the United States, and part of this illegal aliens coming across the border? President Trump wanting to build a wall, is he maybe really wanting to build a wall to keep real hybridization, real aliens out? Is that a possibility coming from the chat room? Robert, USN vet, third generation.
No, it's an interesting question. So the thing about America, okay, so on the one hand, like you said, we're a little more rowdy. We're locked and loaded. There's a gun behind every blade of grass, as that saying goes. And so it's an obstacle to.
And there really is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, there really is, and so the thing about that is, on the other hand, America is also the powerhouse economy. It's also got pretty much the largest military. So if a negative alien force wanted to fully overtly take over the earth, it would have to do it through the superpowers, and it used to be the Soviet Union, but they kind of went away. So now it's mainly Russia, or right now it's China and the United States for the most part. I'm not discounting other countries, but those are the main two players right now, right? So on the one hand, you've got the population in America that's very non-cooperating with the New World Order agenda, potentially. And then you've also got the government, though, and the military, all the military underground bases that seem to be part of the negative alien agenda, too, at least by this point. Now, of course, this kind of goes back to paperclip, all the Nazis being brought over, and the creation of the CIA with and NASA and all that kind of stuff using the Nazi intelligentsia. And the Nazis themselves, as many have talked about, had relations with alien beings. Going back to the Vril Society and the Aldebarans, things like that. And where did the Nazis get their technology? Maybe they got it from other intelligences, right? So a lot of that stuff got transferred over to the USA after World War II, and then of course by 1961, you had Eisenhower warning about the military-industrial complex and what a threat it was, and then JFK was also kind of going off about secret societies, and then boom, he got eliminated. So for the next 30, 40 years, you had this burgeoning military-industrial complex, most likely being ultimately run by negative alien factions who provided them with advanced technology. And so now we're at a state now where you've got this divide between the patriotic, non-cooperative, rowdy American, what do you call it, demographic?
America.
There's America, right?
America. Yeah.
You have that demographic, and then you have this what do you call it, psychopathic, technocratic, occultic, satanic elite that are trying to squash down on that from the top down. So a lot of what you see in the news with like leftist craziness and so on, that's just a little bit of the crumbs from what's really going on behind the scenes between the powers of good and the powers of evil, that they converge in areas where there's power, where there's influence over the future, and one of those areas happens to be America. Okay, so these NWO elite, they have a challenge in front of them to take down what is America, and they got their ways of doing that, but I don't think it's going to succeed necessarily.
Tom,
I don't either, Tom.
I see that from my perspective, and this goes back to one of your.
We got about 5 minutes, Robert.
Yes, sir. Going back to your opening statement about when we were talking about the music and your sense of it being a kind of we're in a real negative place. We're in a kind of a doom and gloom and fear factored kind of future because of these. If you want to really define illegal aliens, maybe it's all these space brothers that are in here trying to monkey around with our stuff, but nonetheless, I too have in my journey found a great deal of conflicting energy, particularly in the consciousness, but I've also seen in the materium cycles within cycles. I'm a catastrophist, or I lean on the catastrophist side of the way in which the materium goes through its own cycles. I think some of the civilizations that have come before and the cycles that they've gone through, they left and it wasn't their fault. There was cataclysmic cosmic energies, everything from comets and asteroids to cosmic waves to magnetic pole shifts, all kinds of physicality that we have zero control over, and it doesn't give a damn whether we're conscious of it or not. But I will say this, in my experience and what I'm seeing in my own research, I think we're at a very pivotal point that is not going to result in a doom, gloom, fear, and catastrophic future. I see exactly the opposite. I see and especially when you look at some of the things, one of my colleagues that we've had on the show here, Jeff Harmon, is a Vedic astrologer, looks at the cosmos.
He'll be here next week.
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes. And it looks at the cosmological cycles of the ways in which the cosmos does its thing, whether we, our space brothers and sisters, or anybody else is aware or even gives a damn about what happens. And there seems to be a change afoot. Something that back in the 70s and 80s, when we were us old guys were going on this new age stuff and love and light and cluelessness and let's move forward and, screw the man and love each other. And then it got into this whole Mayan thing with the Mayan cycle in 2012. And it kind of came in with a whimper. There was a change. It wasn't what people thought it was going to be. There have been time shifts, I believe. And I don't think that it's necessarily tied to the alien agenda and whoever is, comprising that council. and the factions within. Within the deep state, there are factions within that. Within the New World Order, there are factions with that. I kind of look at them all as the analogy would be like a mafia family, right? They all know each other, and they try to get along, but they'll turn around and they'll screw each other as soon as somebody decides that, you know, somebody's crossed a line or some neighborhood boundary.
Right.
I think overall, there is an amazing cosmological energy that is going to profoundly change what we have experienced to this point, what we're experiencing now. And I see the next 20, 30 years as we enter a grand minimum and things start to chill out and the climate goes even more crazy than the crazies that are promoting climate change even think. And it'll be the exact opposite. But we're going to see some profound positive changes, and it's going to happen terrestrially, celestially, and consciously. It's going to be something that people are going to go, whoa.
Robert, I agree with that 100%. I'm super optimistic, just like you are. Tom, we're old guys. You're a younger guy. Do you share that optimism, or do you think we're just being Pollyannish?
Well, I think that consciousness, evolution, and acceleration requires catalysts. And if we know anything from our own lives, hard times can make for, you know, personal growth. So if we are facing hard times as a planet, it's going to lead to personal growth on a planetary level.
Absolutely. Tom, share with the people how they can get in touch with you at your website and also your YouTube channel. And please feel free to share any new projects or great things you have coming up.
Okay, yeah. So if you guys got any questions, I know I didn't fully answer all questions that were asked because we had limited time, but if you got any further questions, you know, about illegals crossing because they're aliens, you know, email me. So yeah, go to my website, montalk.net, montalk.net. You can go there. My email is at the top center. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Tom Montalk, just one word. Yeah, and I got videos on there, and I got free books, articles. I mean, check it out.
Tom, what do you think is the most important thing that people can do right now in their lives?
Okay, yeah. So this is one point I wanted to bring up real quick. And
please.
That's the point, which is that our world, like all the stuff that's happening on the 3D political sphere, it's all a bubble. It's all merely a bubble within a grander alien reality. But even that alien reality is only a bubble within a grander spiritual reality of light versus dark, divine versus demonic, you know, spirit versus matter. So what that means is that on a personal level, what really matters is how you relate to, for example, the alien agenda in the future surrounding that, and also where you stand spiritually. Because where you stand spiritually is going to have the most amount of effect on how good of a service you can provide to others in the times to come, which are going to be very challenging, right? So as long as you can focus on your own spiritual evolution and help others out as a result of that, I think that's the most that you can ask for, you know, in our current situation.
Thank you very much, Tom. He's Tom Montalk. You know where to contact him. My partner in crime is Robert Bauer. Robert, please give out your website and channel.
You can visit what I do at bauer.media, and you can find the Nexus. You can find my voice work. And then, of course, Facebook and YouTube. I'm getting ready to launch that for the Nexus. And next week, we have Jeff Harmon.
Absolutely. Vedic astrologer extraordinaire. We're looking forward to that. Tom, thanks so much for being with us. It's an honor and a privilege to have you. Professor, thanks for being with me and putting up with me again. For these two great gentlemen, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, reminding you that we are the last generation of real humans, and we got this. So let's go ahead and get busy. We'll see you all again next week.